Good morning. I'm Julio Sainz along with Mauricio Riveros. Today we'll meet James Senall, president of NextCore, a business incubator that's helping over 200 new companies in Rochester get off on the right start.
We hope you will be inspired.
Celebrating leaders in Rochester's unique and vibrant business community. We'll meet entrepreneurs whose passion and perseverance have helped push through life's challenges. Join us as we share their stories and journeys to success. It's time to be inspired.
Hi, Jim. Thank you very much for being in Be Inspired, a show that we developed to interview entrepreneurs, people who are working in developing businesses. And you are, in my opinion, one of the exactly people that we should be interviewing, because you are running a great organization that is helping to incubate, to develop, and to help entrepreneurs to develop their own business. But before we talk about your organization and the institution that you represent, let's start talking about Jim. Who is Jim?
Who is Jim? Well, first of all, Mauricio and Julio, thank you so much for having me on the show and for doing the show and spotlighting entrepreneurs, because I watch the show and I am inspired. So I appreciate it. Who am I? So as you mentioned, I run an organization here called NextCore, and we'll talk about that in a second. But I'm almost all of my life been in upstate New York. I was born outside of Buffalo, New York, went to undergrad here at RIT. Moved away for a few years to North Carolina and Pennsylvania, but ended up back here and getting involved in entrepreneurship in the startup community. Live in Penfield, New York today, have 4 kids, 2 in college, 2 in high school. So that keeps us busy.
Well, that's wonderful. And thank you so much for what you guys do in the community. So let's just start talking about the organization and what's the vision, what's the goal, what's the primary focus of the organization that you lead.
Right. So NextCore, which was formerly called High Tech Rochester, changed the name a few years ago. We're a nonprofit, and our mission is to help entrepreneurs launch new companies and to help established businesses increase revenue and profitability. It's all about how do we create more jobs here in the local community. And so today we operate 5 different programs where we do that. We have an incubator, which we opened downtown in the Sibley building to try to jumpstart downtown Rochester. We have 3 what are called Technology Accelerator programs focused on different industries. One is on optics and photonics. One is on, actually 2 of them are on clean energy and clean technology. And then our 5th program goes out into the community to help small and mid-sized manufacturers. And we work with probably 120 different manufacturing companies each and every year. So across all those programs, we're probably working with about 200 different companies each year.
Amazing. That's a huge impact on the community, and we really appreciate what you're doing in your organization. So thank you. Now, what type of, so people that may be listening to this show that maybe have an idea for a business, is that the kind of person that would go to you, or an established business? Who's the right fit for you? It sounds like there's a lot of good entry points.
Yeah, there are a lot of good entry points. We will talk with anybody. So, if you have an idea in your head and you want to come and bounce it off some of our team, we're happy to do that. If you've already got a startup started, you can come in and join the incubation program, which can be virtual services, which has been a lot for the last year, or we've got physical space. We've got prototyping labs and a digital media studio for podcasts and videos. We've got other laboratory space. We've got conference rooms, co-working, all that other kind of stuff as well. But really any stage, and our focus tends to be on technology-based companies, those that have a pretty high growth potential. They might need outside funding someday. They don't necessarily, but that's kind of our sweet spot. And we work very closely with all the other incubators in the community, like the Commissary, who are doing food, the Center for Urban Entrepreneurship, and many others.
That is wonderful. So let's talk about the concept of incubation. That's something that, regular people sometimes say, well, what really this is and what really implies. So let's decodify. What is an incubator?
So an incubator is, historically, a physical place where there are many different resources to help that entrepreneur successfully build their company and avoid a lot of the mistakes that they might otherwise run into on their own. And so it includes on-site coaches and mentors to help them develop the business plan, business model. It includes access to legal, accounting, marketing, office hours. We have venture capitalists that come in. All these pro bono, right? So you can just schedule a time, get feedback from these professionals. A lot of them are from the community and are donating their time. The physical resources, which I talked about. And one of the most important things is just the peer-to-peer interaction. So our incubator program has 60 startup companies in it right now. We have founders roundtables where they get together once a month and they just talk about common issues and can share. And they probably learn, we hate to say it, they probably learn more from each other than they do from, our staff and the coaches and the mentors. But that's really about surrounding them with the right ecosystem to help improve their odds of success.
Great. And can you share one or two success stories from the companies that have come through?
Sure. I mean, it's such a wide range of different kinds of businesses, which makes it exciting every day. And we define a success. It could be a one-person entrepreneur that builds a company and they went from working full-time to running their own business. And so we count that as a success, all the way to what everyone wants to hear about, like who's the next Google and the next Facebook coming out of our community, which we don't have a lot of those. One of my favorite ones, though, is story about General Motors fuel cell R&D facility closed here in Honeyway Falls several years ago. There were 200 or 300 engineers there leading fuel cell R&D center, and a lot of them got asked to move to Michigan. A couple of the guys said, you know what, we have had this idea for a startup company, and we're going to start a business. And so they did. They formed a small fuel cell technology related company. They spun out, they went into some of our programs. Long story short, they were very successful. They ended up using Eastman Business Park to manufacture some of their thin films. They ended up getting acquired by a company called Plug Power, which has been in the news a lot. They built up to about 80 or 90 employees at Eastman Business Park. And now more recently, you've seen Plug Power potentially investing hundreds of millions of dollars in our community and hundreds of jobs. Who knows, that may have happened anyway. But the fact that these two entrepreneurs had an idea for a business, grew it, got Plug Power to establish a foothold here, which they then realized there's a huge resource and talent pool here. And now it's leading to a lot of other stuff. So that's a very recent one that's, I just think so exciting, because it's not your prototypical, maybe a researcher at a university or something else. These were two people from industry that got displaced and they said, we're going to start our own company. It's really great.
That is wonderful. Now, when we talk about this new universe that is opening through technology and innovation, and Rochester has a lot of brain power with the great universities that we have around here, how do you see the current opportunities for innovation? And I will be very specific around, for example, the photonics, right? This is something that you guys are helping. We have been hearing a lot of things about photonics in Rochester, but seems like we are trying to gain momentum, and then COVID hit us and other things happen. So what's your take about that, the photonics aspect specifically?
So photonics, we still have a huge opportunity in photonics, and we are one of the leading places on the planet for optics and photonics. So optics and then integrated into very small packages to make photonics. One of our accelerator programs is called the Luminate Accelerator. And I believe you're going to have Sujatha Ramanujan on the program to talk about that. But we just announced the next cohort. We had applications from 22 different countries to try to get into that program because they want the expertise that Rochester has. And so some of those companies are doing things for eye care, helping with eye surgery, new things with quantum computing and quantum communication. There's some really interesting things that photonics is enabling. It takes a long time for some of these technologies to actually find their way into a product in the market, but we're seeing more and more of them. And we're definitely seeing the world knowing that Rochester is an epicenter for this stuff, which is great.
Now, let's bring to the reality of today, COVID. COVID hit everybody. No one thought that the impact of what will be happening. I remember when we hear about COVID the first time, say, well, we will shut down for a week and then we will go back to work. But now we are more than a year and we're still struggling with this. What's your word about this, and how do you see, again, the reality and the context operating under COVID and post-COVID?
Yep. Well, we were, I mentioned we have an incubator downtown. We actually used to be out in the suburbs in Henrietta. And one of the first things when I came on board was I wanted to help build up downtown Rochester. And so we looked for a location. We ended up choosing the Sibley building right at the center of kind of the center town there. And we opened a facility, 40,000 square feet incubator. And we had a goal of trying to help 100 startups in the first 5 years. And so 3 years in, we're happy to report we've supported over 106 already. So we beat that goal. But just prior to COVID hitting, the facility itself was full. It was bustling. We had networking events going on all the time. There were a lot of these events that just brought people together, which is also very important for an ecosystem to develop. And of course, that got shut down. And so fortunately for the one-on-one mentoring and all that kind of stuff, that transitioned to virtual very well. But we have not been able to replicate the networking and people-to-people kind of interactions. And so that's the piece that I'm really looking forward to getting back. We've learned that the mentoring and coaching and stuff can definitely happen over video, but we definitely need to get some of that in-person stuff back. And I think the community is ready for it.
Jim, as hosts of this entrepreneurship show, and people that have started businesses, a lot of people pitch us their 5-minute version of their business idea. I'm sure you get this a lot. What are some of the hallmarks of a good idea that you've learned to pick up on over time?
Well, the first thing that we tell every entrepreneur is go talk to potential customers or people in the market. So years ago, the model often was, I'll sit in my room and I'll spend 3 months writing a 50-page business plan, and then I'll start showing it to people. I don't want to tell too many people about it. But after kind of the lean startup methodology, out with Steve Blank and others about, you have an idea, go out and talk to 100 people about your idea. Go test if there's really a problem. Is what you have really solving a problem, or is it not? I always talk about, is it an aspirin or is it a vitamin, right? Aspirin is solving pain. Someone will pay you to get an aspirin if they have a bad headache. Vitamin, it's a nice to have, they might not need it. So hallmark of a good idea is, are you really solving a problem in the market that more than you have, just yourself? And how can you validate that that's true? And have you done any kind of, vetting? Maybe you came from the industry, so you've got all kinds of information already that this is a problem. But that's kind of a first part of how do we come up with and tell if it's a good idea. And we tell people, do that before you spend a dime on anything. Don't invest your life savings. Don't quit your job yet. Go try to vet the idea and see if there's a there.
Well, thank you so much, Jim. We'll be back with more after these messages.
That's very wise, because we see some people just jumping and then getting in trouble. So Jim, one of the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs is that, like you said, they are good in something and they love and they have passion and they are very gifted. But developing others, you get to a point that you need to start hiring somebody. Now you need to start training somebody, transferring your knowledge, your expertise, and many cases is you have a great entrepreneur, but then they don't have the team, they don't have the structure. So what's your approach about building teams and developing leadership skills on those entrepreneurs?
Yeah, it's definitely, as you know, a tricky thing. So when is the right time to bring somebody else on, and how do you let go of those responsibilities? And so you hear all the time about, hire people smarter than you at those things and let them go do them. And so we give that same advice. We try to take that advice ourselves when we grow our organization, right? The people that run the programs are much better at their job than I would ever be at doing their job. And so we let them go and off they go and they do a great job. And so that's the same advice for an entrepreneur. They have to understand they're not great at everything. They won't be, nobody is, and really focus on the things they're best at and find other people that like and are good at the things they don't like doing. And if they can do that, then, they'll grow a lot more quickly.
Another thing I wonder, just because you see so many businesses, you hear about so many ideas. I think sometimes we romanticize so many of the technology startups, the Apples of the world, the Googles. How much potential do you think there's out there in non-tech startups?
I think there's a lot of potential. I kind of describe entrepreneurship very much as a continuum from, yes, there's like the super, the Teslas of the world, right? And there's not many of those. But then there's everything from, right, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm opening a coffee shop on the corner because there isn't one in my neighborhood and I want to build one and I might employ 4 or 5 people and that's fantastic. And so, all of it's important. Kauffman Foundation years ago published some statistics that said almost all the net new jobs in America come from companies less than 5 years old. So the way to create jobs is to create more companies of any kind. It doesn't matter, because you might have one that grows to 100 people, but you might have 10 that go to 10 people, and they're both 100 jobs, right? And so they're all critically important. And I think that's why, in Rochester, with the fact that we have so many programs and incubators and resources and SCORE and SBA and all these different things to support all different kinds of entrepreneurs, no matter what technology, non-technology, high growth, low growth, retail, not retail. And we just have this great resource network.
And that's great, Jim, because we have interviewed many of these organizations, and the question that always is in flying in my head is, okay, we have all these amazing programs around there, but what is the level of coordination between the programs and the possibility to avoid overlaps or create synergies? How we can create synergies and be more effective and avoid duplications or unnecessary spending? So how is that process, and what do you see on that specifically in that aspect?
Well, we got a really good head start on that many years ago when the regional councils came into being, and we had an entrepreneurship and innovation work group. And it was everybody that you can think of that supports entrepreneurship, all these different programs. And we met every month for 5 years. And so we got to know what somebody else reported out each month. We kind of talked about priority projects. We actually pitched some to the regional council that we all agreed were priorities. And so we got to know each other very well. And that helps, knowing each other, knowing what each other does, helps you avoid duplication of effort and that. So today, it's very easy for us to refer to each other, right? If we see something that's a technology-based entrepreneur startup, it's a good fit for us, great. If it's somebody doing a food business, right to the commissary. If it's somebody doing something in the city, right to Q. If it's something for RIT, right to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think just getting to know all the other players and knowing what each other does, that goes a long way for avoiding duplication of efforts and making sure we're maximizing the collective resource.
How do you see us, Rochester in 10 years? How do you see our potential?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen our potential. I'm kind of the optimist. The reason I took this job is because the stats I shared about the Kauffman Foundation. And when I looked around, there weren't many organizations whose focus was to create entrepreneurial endeavors. And that was their number one center point mission. And so that's why I came on board, because I saw an opportunity. We have a board of directors, 16 members, good cross section of the community, both U of R, RIT from the technology universities, city, county, lots of entrepreneurs. So I'm very bullish on what we're doing from an ecosystem standpoint. And those little seedlings that we're all helping to foster, 10 years from now, I think we're going to have a very different looking community and a culture. It takes a long time to change the culture into an entrepreneurial culture. But the more we see successes, and you can point to successes, the more that the media picks up on stories that are success stories, that all helps build. And I think we're going to see a much more resilient economy with a lot more companies who might be smaller. But, again, you point to the big three of yesteryear. We don't want 3 giant companies that employ everyone. We want lots of small companies, and that makes a resilient economy.
And that is wonderful, Jim. I think the essence of bringing that perspective and hope about the future is essential. And there is a lot of entrepreneurs out there who invested, COVID hit, they are struggling right now. Some, in some cases, decided to close the doors. What's the message to those to bring that hope? We have read many books talk about, hey, failure is not a failure, it's just a lessons learned. It's an opportunity to learn and bring back. So what's your message to that community that is being impacted right now, people who are almost closing business and things like that?
Yeah, I think it's, probably no one has gone through a situation like we've gone through in the last year. And so for those that are still in it, continue to do whatever you can to grind it out and seek help. There are so many people out in the community that want to help. And there's some resources that are hard to find and you don't know about them, but through asking a lot of folks, you might be able to access those. For those that had to close down, I would just say, like you said, it is a a big learning experience. I've learned a lot more from the major failures I've had than from some of the successes. At the time, they're extremely painful, but later on, you're like, okay, I can now tell somebody else, don't do this because this is what happened to me. And so I would just tell them, learn from it. You know, when you're ready again, let's take another try at it with your next idea. You will be much further along, and it's a long-term journey. It's not a 1 or 2 year thing. This is how do we set you up for success long-term.
Jim, thank you very much. Really impressive. I love what you guys are doing in the community. It's so significant, so important today more than ever. I think be able to have incubators, be able to have the support, the volunteers have experience how to invest in them. I found that when you have mentors and volunteers and you work together, great things can happen. So thank you so much. And I'm sure that we will have you again in our program and see the progress in the great things that you guys are doing in your organization. Thank you very much.
Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it.
Coming up next week, we'll meet the managing director of Luminate, which is investing in high-tech businesses in Rochester and around the world.
To watch today's episode and the complete interviews of our guests, go to rochesterfirst.com/be-inspired. For more great talk with Rochester's entrepreneurs, listen to Bodette 97.1 Saturdays at 9 a.m. For Mauricio Riveros, I'm Julio Saenz. We'll see you next week on Be Inspired.